I met Cynthia because I was teaching her son, and after, we usually plan 2-hour lessons, sometimes 3 hours, because after his lesson we always ended up talking about education, philosophy, We ended up becoming very good friends, and actually, if it wasn't for Cynthia, I wouldn't have come to this university and I wouldn't have started my PhD. Because when I applied to the one school to do a PhD, I was turned down. And I called Cynthia in tears, and I said, I can't believe I've been teaching courses at this university, and they didn't let me come here to do a PhD. Because they had certain prerequisites, and I didn't have them. And she said, you know, you should come to Ottawa U. And I looked on the website, and it said, you need da-da-da-da-da-da. I said, I don't have any of that. And she's the one who said to me, you have experience, you have chutzpah, go talk to the dean. And next thing I knew, I was here. And saying, Cynthia, can you be on my thesis committee? And it was like, well, we're really close friends, we shouldn't do that. So anyway, she has been a mentor anyway, even though I'm not officially recognized. And all I can say is Cynthia is one of the most beloved teachers in the Faculty of Education. Her students talk about how she has shifted their thinking, and how when they came into the university thinking they were going to be learning how to teach literacy, they thought literacy probably just meant how to read. And they learned from Cynthia that it means a lot more, and she's going to tell you more about that.
I'd like to start off by reading a quote, and this is a quote from one of my course outlines. Text can be anything, from a discussion to a musical score, from a film to a piece of sculpture, from a road sign to a magazine article, from a poem to a computer game, and from a painting to a footprint. So that is the first introductory comment that my students get when they come into my class. For today, entitled, The Turn of a Word, the Color of a Tear, the Embodiment of a Story, Extending Ways of Being in the World. I work with multimodalities, and I also work with difference. And both of them come together in many ways. One is in teacher narrative inquiry, another is in literacy, another is in learning differences. And today I'd like to share with you like a sampling of that, kind of a taste of what I do both inside and outside of the classroom. So this afternoon, I'd like to share some of my thoughts, actions, feelings, and reactions to multimodalities as a means of knowing in the world, as a means of expanding the range of pedagogical possibilities for transacting in the curriculum of everyday life, both in and out of school halls. Theoretically grounded in the transaction of the aesthetic and efferent, practically supported by multiple modalities, and poetically prosed in both word and image, I invite you to consider in compilation. What I'd like you to do first is we're going to just do a very quick exercise. Normally, if I had more time, we'd spend a lot more time on this, but we're going to just abbreviate this activity, but I still want you to engage in it. The word democracy figures very prominently in our event that has been taking place over the course of the last 2 days. So what I would like you to do with this is I'd like you to select a word that you would associate with the word democracy. So if you could just take about like a half a minute for that. Select a word that you would associate with the word democracy. Once you have that word, my colleague Pat Palouas is going to come around and she's going to distribute a clutch of colored pieces of paper. So as they come around, I'd like you to select a colored piece of paper that represents your word. Then what I'd like you to do is take your selected piece of paper and tear it into a shape that represents your word. The shape can be abstract, the shape can be realistic, and again, there's no wrong or right way of doing this. Whatever you come up with is fine. So again, you're going to take a word, you're going to get the word democracy. What word immediately comes to mind when you hear the word democracy? Then as the paper goes through, you're going to take piece of paper, the color that represents your word. And then you're going to take a minute. Let's take a minute, and you're going to take your piece of paper and tear it into a shape that represents your word. Again, realistic shape, it can be abstract, and there's no right or wrong way of doing this. So just going to give you just 2 minutes to work on that. And then we'll see what you've come up with. Okay, I'd like to just ask if anyone would venture to share what they've come up with, the word and the color they selected, and what did they tear? What was the final product that would become, again, part of the process? Anyone out there? Yes.
My word was grassroots.
Okay.
And I took a green piece of paper that I tore into a circle. That's where it started, as a circle, but then I tore little tears into the sides of the circle and bent them in to make it look like grass growing up.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
What
One
was
other
the word?
one. Yes.
What was the word?
Grassroots.
Oh, grassroots.
Grassroots.
It's 2 words.
Is it Margaret?
It's hyphenated.
Oh, God, I remember. Yes.
I had the word participation
Okay.
and used the circle as sort of symbolic of everybody being heard around the circle. And used the red only because there wasn't a color that I really wanted to use. And it sort of represents voice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I know I said 2, but one more.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had, my word was community,
Okay.
and it was a circle, and I couldn't tell what color the paper was, but I wanted something which was equivalent to white, because that's all inclusive.
Okay, thank you very much. Equity and difference. My word that I would pick would be difference, and I work in difference all the time. In the landscape of learning, we must stop assuming that presenting material in the same way to all students makes education equitable. Instead, we should recognize the value of difference and select materials and methods appropriate to different students. More and more emphasis is being placed on scripts of sameness in education in the guise of equity or democracy. Rather, we need to think locally in multiple sites situated in uniqueness and difference. Pertinent research literature recognizes the value of using multiple modes of expression to enhance and extend ways of being in the world. And again, I had mentioned that I use multimodalities both in and outside of the school halls, and I'm always having my camera with me, even if it's in the guise of a cell phone or my iPad. And these are 2 pictures that I took to represent this quote here from the back of the train. Some of the things that I use in the classroom, I just want to exemplify what I mean by that. Some of them are resolution scrapbooks for unfolding plot lines. And what's a resolution scrapbook? It's a reflective and multimodal chronicling of an individual's response to life applied to novel study. So when we're talking about a novel in my classroom, I work in teacher education methodologies for adolescents, is we will take we'll make our own scrapbooks, and in the middle, we'll use what I did here today. I'll say, you have a whole choice of colors, and what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a color that represents the conflict or the main event in that story, which we're going to put in the center of the scrapbook, and then I'd like you to tear that conflict. And the pages that come before are what came before that event, and the pages that come after are kind of the resolution of that event. Whirligig installations for representing a book setting. This was a book, and it was entitled Whirligig by Paul Fleischman. If you haven't read any of Paul Fleischman's work, I would highly recommend it. But it's a reflective desktop-sized recycled wooden structure complete with a whirling arm, an array of selected representations signifying segments of a character's journey. And these are some examples that the students have created as they were studying the book Whirligig. Body biographies for studying characterization. They're visual and written rendering of a character's development. And essentially, when we were studying Charlotte Doyle, the True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle, who makes a transformation as she crosses the Atlantic in the 18th century, we have life-size outlines of a body, and then the students will actually create the characterization, pulling from quotes, pulling from the book, doing symbols, and so on. And I always use recycled materials, as you can see from here. So those are some examples of multimodalities in the classroom. In particular, Maxine Greene so aptly asserts that such exchange of meaning can encourage individuals to unexpectedly perceive patterns and structures they never knew existed in the surrounding world. James Castle, I'm just going to talk about two cases, the word case, two individuals. And he was very unique. He was born in the late 1800s, and his parents ran the postal station. And he would take all of the materials that they had, the scraps of paper and so on, and he would create this wonderful art. And he worked in this shed. Although he was denied pencils, paper, ink, anything he might use to make art, because when he went to school, he initially went to school for the deaf because he couldn't hear. And so they sent him off, and it wasn't very successful. And they told him, have him go home and just don't let him get near anything, like any kind of paper or anything. But so what he did, that nothing did not deter the young man. He taught himself with anything he could get his hands on. And death since birth, James never learned to sign, read, or write in a conventional manner, but instead communicated through his art. He used scraps of printed matter and packaging materials for use as surfaces, collage elements, and source material. The bulk of James's work can be classified as drawing, rendered in his preferred medium of stove soot and saliva, applied with a sharpened stick as stylus. He couldn't get his hands on anything, so he used his own saliva and the soot. In 2011, the first international retrospective of his work was held. Then we have Snowflake Bentley, otherwise known as Wilson Bentley. He was a self-educated farmer. Bentley attracted world attention with his pioneering work with snow crystals, commonly known as snowflakes. By adapting a microscope to a bellows camera and years of trial and error, he became the first person to photograph a single snow crystal in 1885. He would go on to capture more than 5,000 snowflakes during his lifetime, not finding two alike. Quote from him, "I was extremely happy from the day of the first snowfall, which usually came in November, until the last one, which sometimes came as late as May." And I love this quote because it really brings in that whole notion of difference. Bentley observed nature with both the eye of the poet and the eye of the scientist. Through the lens, I found that snowflakes were miracles of beauty, and it seemed a shame that this beauty should not be seen and appreciated by others. Every crystal was a masterpiece of design, and no one design was ever repeated. When a snowflake melted, that design was forever lost. Just that much beauty was gone without leaving any record behind. Now, through the lens of difference and see, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a walk, a little bit of a journey here. And this is a picture of Snowflake Bentley and looking through his camera. Set into the missing pages of a summer day, the sun marks time with the gesture of an owl's wing. Kinetic sculptures move in place to a quartet's beat, while the light tints the forest golden yellow. Stretched along a riverfront highway, 11 houses welcome the wash of an autumn rain. Metal chairs rest against the rust of front porch railings. Lodgers sip tea under the cover of pull shades. Standing in the middle of a fenced-in shoreline, moorings separate themselves from the edges of a rotting dock. Houseboats drift among the cadence of red-winged blackbirds as the sun lays copper strips on the footbridge floor. At the back by the perennials planted last spring, a barn reclaims relics of tin, wire, and salvaged wood. Porch posts stand in line among the corrugated rooftops, where an assembly of dragonflies installs hinge doors. Positioned to the right of a potting shed, a tinker considers stockpiles of scrap metal parts. Onyx silhouettes reflect patterns of falling water beside the comforting lull of a blue chicory swing. In the distant, beyond the tree-edged track, a cello notes the pitch of a loon's call. Schools of fishing shacks bunch together in late July, offering refuge to passengers on the Hudson 45. Placed perpendicular to Garrison Station, a pass-through permits entry into an afternoon fair. Artisans work under the folds of off-white tents, set along the red sails of a junk's shoreline. Closest to the east side of the Garden Gate, enamel landscapes stake cattails in cricket rows. Hydrangeas drift among the shade of more ornamental grasses, as a butterfly box hangs askew in a kiwi garden. Lay comments that experience with media offer children a variety of ways to construct meaning. Yet it was the creamy texture of pastel that re-engaged her on the page so that she could experiment. Media became a vehicle through which feelings were embedded through ink, wax, graphite, pastel, and paint. The point was not to teach them to paint pictures, but to show them a way of seeing. And I love that quote by Georgia O'Keeffe. At a time when teachers often are required to mold their teaching to external standards, the presence of these texts seemed all the more important. So again, I'd like to end with the quote that I started with. Text can be anything, from a discussion to a musical score, from a film to a piece of sculpture, from a road sign to a magazine article, from a poem to a computer game, and from a painting to a footprint. And just a footnote to that quote is another quote. It is still our custom, unhesitantly and unthinkingly, to demand that the clocks of language all be set to Central Standard Time. Thank you.